Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. I think we've been on a good streak lately because the people I've been meeting, the stories I've been hearing, they're increasingly interesting. A lot of them have a common thread. A lot of the people that we have on our show, as you well know, started in one direction and eventually iterated to something else entirely. We don't know where the end of that story might be. And I think today's guest, Tony Loyd, is emblematic of exactly that type of journey. As I was speaking with Tony before we started taping, I can clearly say Tony's done more things than I can remember. He has worked in the corporate world. He's worked as a consultant. He has lived in 47 of the 50 states, apparently, and now finds himself in Minnesota. Tony spends most of his time on executive leadership, helping people untangle things they may believe have a Gordian knot flavor to them, but ultimately they just need to step back and think about what that longer journey feels like. Tony, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
So one of the things I've noticed is you talk about this concept of the sprint versus endurance.
Sure.
And I think that when we're younger, we feel there's never enough time and we're just so eager to move as quickly as possible. Then somewhere along the way, we start to look back at that trail we're running on and things start to happen and we start to reflect. Thinking back on your career, when did you first start to recognize that maybe running straight ahead as fast as you could wasn't the best thing to do?
Yeah, Gary, if a high school counselor would have described my career path, somebody would have come and grabbed that high school counselor and locked them up for their own safety, right? Because there's no way that my career path could have been what it was. But when I came out of school and I was young, it was not too long after 3 Mile Island had melted down, had its accident. And so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had come in and they were, concerned, if you will, not surprisingly. And so there was a real demand for an area called health physics or radiation protection. So this is an area where you measure radiation and contamination, you set protective measures, you work on environmental impact, all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up with a technical degree that led me in that direction. And that launched me into this sort of technical consulting career. So sort of an engineering career. We did a lot of calculations around how to keep radiation exposure as low as reasonably achievable. We call that ALARA. There's a lot of, shielding calculations, a lot of those kinds of things. So it's very technical kind of stuff. I always say I wasn't a great engineer, but I knew how to program a Hewlett-Packard programmable calculator. So I could do the work. That lasted over a period of time, and then eventually I had an opportunity to teach or to train people in that particular specialty. So I pivoted my career from doing the work to learning and development around that work. And I became an instructional designer. I got, some additional certifications in that. I eventually picked up a marketing manager credential, but I worked within that learning and development space for a period of time. And I realized that the question wasn't, managers would come to me and they would say, we have a training problem. And I would say, well, can you describe the problem? Yeah, my employees won't do what I ask them to do. Well, okay, that could be a training issue, right? or it could be something else. So really, I was branching into more of a human performance improvement sort of career. And I was able to take that outside of my technical career, and I went more into a generalized learning and development, human performance improvement career. And that lasted for about 9 years. I was doing consulting work out in the industry, and I called on John Deere, world famous company, agriculture, construction, consumer products, et cetera. They make engines and transmissions that go into OEM equipment all around the world. Global brand, multiple billion-dollar company. I was doing just a little consulting job with them, and they had an opportunity for somebody to come in to work within their they had a marketing manager kind of role available. And honestly, they asked me if I would interview for it. And I went in sort of half-hearted because I thought, do I really want to come in out of the cold? I kind of like running my own shop. This is nice. I get to choose where I go and what I do and when I work. And, if I want to do my work at 3 o'clock in the morning, nobody's checking to see if I'm in my seat, So I interviewed for this job at John Deere, and I met a guy named Tony Worthington. And Tony was eventually a vice president. And I'm not sure what he did after I left there, but he was around a vice president level. And Tony said to me in the interview, he goes, so tell me what it is that you do. And so I had built a little table in my head, and I just said, well, your job description says this, and here's some experience I have, and your job description says this. And he stopped me in the middle of a sentence, and he goes, I didn't ask you what my job description said. I want to know what you can do. And I was like, okay, well, let me just be honest. If this were my company, here's what I'd be focusing on. And I just started just consulting at my best level. And Tony, at the end of that conversation, he said, I tell you what, when you come to work for us, and this isn't a matter of if, when you come to work for us, if you can do it, and he just did his hand sort of like a motion towards him, if you could do it, bring it on. And I thought, oh, heck, I want this job now.
So wait, so you described what you wanted the job to be.
Yep.
And he was like, let's go.
Yeah. He was like, don't be limited by your job description. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what the job description says. I want to know what you can do.
How did you know enough about what they needed to be able to make that jump?
Well, I think there are two things, Gary, and you'll recognize this. One, I had gone in and done a small consulting role with them within a limited business unit. So I just saw people interacting day to day. But let's just be honest here for a second. Every organization wants to create sustainable, profitable growth. And so, it's the mandate of every executive to grow the company, because if you're not growing, you're stagnating, you're falling behind. But you can't grow what's not profitable. And then if you're only profitable for the quarter, the week, the month, whatever, that's not sustainable. And so I had been inside long enough to see some systems and processes that they were using that were not leading towards sustainable, profitable growth. So we had it's one thing to sit down with somebody as like, I'm an interviewee and you're interviewing me for this management level position, but it's another to have a peer-to-peer conversation where I go, look, I've been running my own shop long enough to know these things are broken here. And Tony recognized that I wasn't, it wasn't my first rodeo, right? It wasn't even my second rodeo. I might know something about how all this stuff works. So, he recognized that and acknowledged it. I went to work for John Deere. We started a thing called John Deere University. It was a intrapreneurial startup in the middle of a 150-year-old company. So this was during the dot-com boom. We made a decision to create a dot-com startup within the company. We grew this thing so that we took a cost center and we at least brought it back to cost neutral. So they'd been spending millions of dollars on learning and development. we sold learning and development outside of the company to dealers, distributors, and customers, and offset the cost of training employees. So it generated its own costs plus. And so I did that for a period of time. We organized across this 150-year-old company, across multiple geographies, across multiple business units. We unified the learning and development across all of them. And really, it was a dot-com startup. That caught the attention of some people with a spinoff from S.E. Johnson. They asked me to come over there. The spinoff was called Diversity. I was over there about 3 years. Really, kind of, what S.E. Johnson did, Gary, you'll appreciate this. S.E. Johnson had Johnson Wax Professional, and they spun it off from S.E. Johnson. And then they go, gosh, we don't have a big enough portfolio. We're not really serving enough places. We don't have a big enough customer base. So they went out and they acquired 10 other smaller companies and brought them in. And the first meeting I went to in the company, I just sat down with a bunch of people and I said, can you just give me your business card so I can keep up with who's who here? And everybody, this is back in the days when we carried business cards. Every single business card, 10 business cards, they all had a different logo and company name on them. And when I would say to somebody, how long have you been with the company? They go, well, it depends. Which company do you mean? Well, the word cluster came to mind a couple of times. It was a mess, right? So I had a mandate there to sort of unify the culture across this spinoff so that there was the name of the company was Diversity. So there's one Diversity way of selling. There's one Diversity way of leading. There's one, to unify the culture. So we did that. And what we did was we attracted some investment capital. A company came and purchased us. Then they spun us off to Bain Capital. Then let's see. I think it was Sealed Air purchased us. And that freed me up from there. I got a little piece of that. And then I was able to leave the company. And then I think they eventually sold it to Bain Capital. I think that's who's holding them today. So that gave me the opportunity to go do other things. I was recruited up here by Medtronic in Minnesota. I was with them for a period of time, and then Buffalo Wild Wings recruited me. And I was 55 years old at this point, and honestly, Gary, you're an investment guy, right? So at some point, you look at your portfolio and you go, "That's enough." At this point, I'm sort of hoarding, right? I've got enough. I'm comfortable. I'm 55. I'm healthy. I can do anything I want. So I did. I took early retirement from my corporate career. I went off to that weekend after I left my corporate career. I went off to the University of Minnesota for a seminar, and I met a group of people that were doing entrepreneurship for social good. So I met them. I started talking to them. University of Minnesota recruited me in as like an executive mentor. I mentored a group of those, and that put me out in the network of all this sort of social entrepreneurs. So businesses with a social mission. And I, began to talk to them and mentor them, excuse me. And it came out that they had great stories. So in 2015, I launched a podcast called Social Entrepreneur. I ran it from 2015 to 2022. I wrote a book on the topic. It hit #1 on Amazon. That called me out to some speaking gigs. I was doing that for a period of time. That was around 2018. And honestly, Gary, what I had was a lifestyle business. It was, it's enough to bring in enough income. It's enough to pay for things I want to pay for without touching my investments. And I continue to do that. I continue to run this company. The name of the company was Culture Shift Companies. And I ran that company for a period of time. Now, in April of this year, I had a big pivot. So on April, starting late in 2024, my wife and I settled on the idea that we were going to divorce. And that's never a pleasant thing. I have to say, I still admire her. I still like her. I think she's a fantastic human being. Just I will love her forever. She's a great human being. But it was time, right? It was time for us to go our separate ways, which was incredibly sad. And I moved out of the house on April 29th of this year. Where I'm at right now, I can look across the room and I can see the living room where I was. I've got friends over who are helping me move in boxes and a sofa and some stuff. And I get a text on my phone and I look at the text and the text says, check my chart. Well, my chart is this portal for my doctor, for my healthcare. I open up the my chart message and the first word I saw was malignant.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's not a good word.
No.
Now, another thing I didn't mention is over the years, in order for me to deal with, like the stresses of being an executive on the move, you know what that's like. I'd taken up running, and I was a fairly good endurance athlete. I had been invited multiple times to the age group world championships in different places in Chicago and New York this year, and then next year in Cape Town. I don't want to brag, but I'm a pretty good runner, right? And I do other athletic endeavors. So I'm an endurance athlete, and then I get lung cancer. So on April 29th, as I'm going through a divorce, I get this message. It says lung cancer. I made like a penny dropped in my head. And I said, whatever it is that I'm here to do, I better get busy doing it. I have a motto for this year. Life is short, play big, love hard. That's my motto for this year. So I started thinking about what does that look like for me? So 5 weeks ago, it'll be 6 weeks tomorrow, I guess, 6 weeks ago tomorrow, I had lung cancer surgery. They removed 25% of my lungs. I also received an invitation for the 2026 Age Group World Championship in Cape Town, South Africa, and I accepted the invitation. So I'm on this journey to figure out how I will get 100% out of the 75% of my lungs remaining. The other thread that came up out of that is I said, I know a lot about being an endurance athlete. I know what it's like to sit in the leadership chair in an executive role in a Fortune 500 company. So how do those two things come together? So if you take the mindset of an endurance athlete and you put together that with your leadership experience, you end up with endurance leadership. I've got a keynote speech that I'm doing around the country. They say that keynote speakers, they talk about the thing they need to learn the most in their own lives. So I need endurance in my own life. I need to figure out how I'm just going to pour the best of me out into organizations around the world. And so I've developed this endurance leadership framework. I've got a partner who is writing with me. She's a psychotherapist and also a social worker. She's helping me with a deep peer-reviewed research. We've come up with an endurance leadership framework. And from that, we have keynote speeches. We have workshops at 3 different levels for first-line supervisors, middle managers, and executives. And we have coaching available, a limited number of coaching slots for executives. So
let me go back a little bit.
Yeah, let's just do that. I've been going on for a while.
That's fine. Something you said early on that you kind of was your kickoff point was your first role professionally was engineering.
Yep.
So knowing engineers as I do, engineers and mathematicians, you're looking for a solution on the outside. There's an equation somewhere. It might be complicated, it might not be. But programming an HP calculator back in those days with a reverse Polish notation was no small thing. I remember.
No, it wasn't.
And you get a response that didn't start with ERR. It was always encouraging.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it seems like, Tony, that you were using your natural background as an engineer to solve human problems. That
Mm,
the set of circumstances you would look at wouldn't be reds and rads and rems. It would
mhm.
be human behavior. It would be human
Right.
interaction,
Right.
which if you think about and you step away far enough and don't get too involved in it, you can start to see
Yeah.
how those things interrelate.
Yeah.
Did you realize that was happening at the time?
Well, here's one of the things that happened for me along the way. I mean, Gary, you and I are the result of the people we've met, the conversations we've had, the books we've read, the teachers we had, right? So all of that has poured into us to become the human beings we are. So there was a guy along the way, a guy named Frank Clement, and Frank at the time had a thing called the Boulder Center of Accelerated Learning. It was in Boulder, Colorado. I was in this learning and development space. So I went out to take this workshop from Frank, and Frank was a systems thinker. Frank worked in Bell Labs. Frank was on the team that invented the speakerphone. When Lyndon Baines Johnson's speakerphone didn't work, they called Frank in the middle of the night and woke him up and got him to get on an airplane and go to the White House and fix the speakerphone. Which, by the way, the solution was that LBJ had it right in the center of the table in the Oval Office. And because of that, there was a acoustic feedback
Right.
from the roof down into the phone. He moved it over 2 inches, drew a little square around it with some tape and said, leave it alone, and then left the room, right? So that's Frank. He also was on the team that invented the computer touchscreen. So Frank is this systems thinker. When he looked at learning and development, he looked at it from a systems perspective. I feel that way about endurance, right? We may come back to this or we may not, but as I've been doing this deep research, I realized that the branch I was going down wasn't resilience. I thought I was thinking about resilience. I was using the word resilience and endurance the same. So I'll come back to that if you want. But as I got into the research, the peer reviewed research, and I looked at it from a systems perspective, that's why, I mean, I love a good framework. And, so we've built a framework based on peer reviewed research that is really becoming IP. It's becoming intellectual property that here's Gary, this is just between you and me and your 10 billion listeners. But just between us, honestly, here's what I'm going to do. I have a new company that I've started. My personal brand is tied to it. So Tony Loyd is one Loyd. So you can go to tonyloyd.com and find stuff about me. I have a company called Culture Shift Advisors. So that is my legal entity that I own. We're launching a thing called the Culture Shift Institute to develop IP. And we're putting the IP into a trust and eventually a nonprofit so that after I die, which may not be that many years, I don't know, after I die, that we'll have licensable IP that will generate funds to fund a nonprofit to give money away through a foundation. That's the play right now. If I said, life is short, play big, love hard, I'm playing big right now. But that's the vision of what we're working on right now.
No, I think that's wonderful. I really do. I think that's awesome. And a lot of times staying on the right side of the dirt
Yeah.
is about getting out of bed and having something to do that's meaningful.
Yeah, it is.
I've
Yeah.
seen too many people that they basically are looking at a job that they go to and they hate. They can't wait to retire, and then they fade away.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you and I were talking about this before, like the Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah,
that's what you got to do.
absolutely correct. And I admire the fact that you're looking to create an IP asset, which is no small thing.
No.
It's got to meet a number of standards, such as
Yes.
can't be obvious.
Right.
It has to serve a purpose.
Right.
If you're going to seek to copyright or patent it, it's a whole other
Yeah.
process and procedure.
Yeah.
But even just having that intentionality to do something and create a resource where you're kind of harvesting and organizing all of these different things that you've done is incredible.
Thank you.
Does AI play into this at all?
It's a great question. I think so. A good friend of mine is an investor, and well, you've talked to several venture capitalists, and he said, "I bet on two things. I bet one on what's on the bleeding edge, right? If you come to me with it, I have an AI that creates blockchain that, like whatever the latest buzzwords are, and you get him so far out on the bleeding edge, you're kind of giving him a nosebleed. He's going to give you some money. At the same time, he will bet on companies that are going the other way, that are going towards the human touch, that are going towards connecting with other human beings, that are going towards, when everybody gets excited about Starbucks, he might put a big bet on Starbucks, but he's also going to bet on its corner coffee shop that isn't Starbucks, that isn't doing those kinds of things, right? That it's local, it's organic, it's all that. So this is more the counterplay, right? In a world of AI, here's what I found is I was talking to an executive recently, and she said, she described her issues, what was going on with her. And I said, it sounds to me like you're between a rock and a hard place. And she said, a rock and a hard place, I'm in a rock tumbler. Like there are rocks hitting me from every direction, and grit is polishing my body. And it's just like, it's coming from every direction. And so we have this churn that's happening right now. You think about it, you've got tariffs that are on one day and off the other. You have supply chain issues. You have, talent pipeline issues. And you can go on and name any of these areas that we deal with as leaders in organizations. And there's like a choke point coming from every direction. It's the churn of it all, right? So how do you, as a leader, endure in the midst of that kind of rock tumbler churn? That's what I'm working on right now. It's almost the result of AI and acceleration and all that. When the dot-com bubble came along, like everything became internetified. It was all connected to the internet all of a sudden, and now my refrigerator is calling somebody to say the filter needs to be changed, right? But I'm kind of saying, okay, in the midst of all that, how do we create a bubble, if you will, so that we can endure in the midst of all that chaos? So that's kind of my play. It's
So you
more
bring
of a
up
human
up
play.
some really, really interesting points. I'm pretty involved with all of that, especially from the standpoint of uh, deep, let's say, informational resources and being able to mine them for wisdom and guidance.
Yeah.
A couple things in radio communications, whether it's you're talking on a shortwave radio or an aviation radio, there's something called signal to noise ratio.
Yes.
And signal to noise is always important. How do you read me? 5 by 5 means you got strong signal and very little noise. So when we look at the amount of information that's created on a daily basis, it's unfathomable.
Yeah,
The
right.
amount of information that a person can consume on a daily basis is limited. And then
Right.
you have to make the assumption that at some point you got to do something with that information and turn it into some form of output.
Right.
What I've been working on personally, because I've accumulated over my career an extraordinary amount of training materials where I spent 4 decades training other financial advisors,
Right.
either through coaching sessions on the phone, either videos or personal 6-hour sessions. And it added up to about 32 gigabytes, which is a lot of information.
Yeah.
And we're in the process, I'm working with the people that are helping me with another project of basically turning that into and utilizing it for a vector search function, which means you're going to be able to query it almost about anything. And it's going to pull a phrase from here and a word from there and a word from here and a word from there. And it's going to start designing vectors and putting them together.
Right.
And it starts to kind of go through this regenerative, augmented search which ultimately ends up in an LLM, which is what ChatGPT basically is for the most part.
Right.
So think about for a second, if you were to take all the information, all the knowledge, and all the wisdom you've developed over time, every keynote speech you've ever given, every coaching session you've ever given,
Right.
and you were able to put that into a massively disorganized text file, what AI can do is it can not only distill the messaging that's there, but it can create the intent of the message you want to convey almost as if it's you based on a completely novel question.
Right.
Which is where I think, at least from my perspective, a learning perspective, AI has unbelievable possibilities because it can distill all of that massive noise into what do I need to know? When do I need to know it? And how do I get it as quickly as possible?
Right. Right. Right.
So there's a lot of possibilities. The shortage is not in the tech. Where a lot of people make mistakes right now is they're building like awesome tech and it's got nowhere to go.
Yes.
Steve Jobs, when he came up with the concept of Apple Computer, said, I don't care about technology.
Yeah.
I want to build things that people want to use that makes their lives better.
Right.
He built it from the back to the front.
Right.
Which I think is just the way you have to do things.
Right.
So I think you're really onto something here. It's laudable what you're doing. I pray your health is going to square itself away. And just as an aside, I have a very good friend. He's a former member of SEAL Team 2. And in one of the Gulf Wars, he opened the wrong door and got a whiff of something that basically cost him both of his lungs.
Wow.
And he's getting a new heart this year, and he'll be on his third and fourth lung this year.
Wow.
He still runs.
Yeah.
And you talk about grit and determination, endurance.
Right.
And he's not a big guy, he's not a tough guy, but inside he's just pure iron.
Right.
So good for you. That's excellent.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the good news is my health is that, they removed the cancer. They got good margins. There's no reason to have chemo or radiation therapy from this point on. So my health is great, except I'm just getting used to what it's like to have 75% of my lungs. And I have some sort of post-surgical complications, some bruising in my abdomen, some things that, it's just a matter of time, right? All I need right now is enough time to heal. That's it. So I seem to be doing really well. That's the health report. Yes. So I'll just stop there.
But I mean, you've got great energy. I mean, clearly you're well in possession of where you want to be, what you want to do, and how things want to go. And I just think it's awesome. How do people find you, Tony, if they want to retain you or hire you for a keynote? Tell me a little bit about where we can find your book.
Right. TonyLoyd.com, TONY, and there's one L in Loyd, LOYD. So TONYLOYD.com. The book is called Crazy Good Advice, 10 Lessons Learned from 150 Leading Social Entrepreneurs. You can find it wherever great books are sold. And I'm on social media all over the place. If you look for Tony Loyd with one L, I'm not too hard to find. And so, just Google me.
Tony, thank you so much for joining. It's fascinating to listen to the story. It's unlike any other I've ever heard. I think yours has a lot of pages yet to be written. And I'm definitely going to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I can't thank you enough for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary.
Been listening to The Public Only Knew. My guest today has been Tony Loyd, all around everything guy, with a lot left yet to accomplish. Tony, thanks once again. Be well, sir.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.